US Central Command said that its latest targets included Iranian aircraft hangars and drone storage sites. But President Trump has suggested that US forces could soon target an underground site at Pickaxe Mountain, near one of Iran's main nuclear enrichment facilities. Iranian military leaders responded that such an attack would be considered a major escalation. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has told a Senate committee the war with Iran has cost $37.5 billion so far, nearly $8 billion more than an estimate in May. Mr. Hegseth asked lawmakers for additional funding and warned that military training would need to be curtailed without an urgent funding boost. The Defense Secretary said Iran had been weakened, but did not provide a timeline for the war to end.
Iran is at the weakest point militarily it has ever been in the past decade. Certainly, maybe in 47 years, as they've gathered effectively a terror army. So I acknowledge they still have capabilities, no doubt. But the amount of damage that we've done to them over the course of these series of operations has put them in the worst place they've ever been.
Well, our North America correspondent Peter Bowes has been following Hegseth's testimony.
Well, this war is proving to be very expensive. In fact, this hearing took place in the hours before the 11th successive night of strikes by the US on Iran, which has just been completed. And we understand from the US military that they hit Iranian military targets, including aircraft hangars and drone storage facilities, much as they have for almost 2 weeks now. And this hearing was to ask Congress for more money to continue funding this war, some $67 billion for operations in the Middle East, described as urgent and necessary by Pete Hegseth. And as you mentioned, that $37.5 billion is what it's cost so far. And his argument was that the military is already fighting the war and that the bill is mounting rapidly and that the Pentagon can't continue indefinitely by taking money from training, from maintenance and from other operations. He said without additional funding, the US's military readiness would suffer. He said training will be cut, weapons stocks would remain depleted, and the armed forces could struggle to prepare for other threats. Now, the Republicans and Democrats largely divided down political lines. A lot of criticism from the Democrats saying the administration was using this demand for more money, and they described it as asking for a blank check, and lots of questions about when the war was going to end, how the war was going to end. Republicans largely in favour of providing the money, although there was some dissent from John Kennedy, who was a senator from Louisiana, who was clearly frustrated by what he saw as evasive answers. So what happens next? Well, the Congress will have to write a funding bill, which, if it eventually gets to Donald Trump's desk to become law, will have to be passed by both the Senate and the House.
But all this talk of funding as the war escalates, and America says it wants to further degrade Iran's ability to attack ships in the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran says it is now fighting a full-scale war. Well, our international editor Jeremy Byrne has this assessment of where the conflict might be heading.
The risk now is that the war explodes back to the intensity it reached in March. The diplomatic challenge is to find a way to short-circuit that, to de-escalate back to a point where the US and Iran can talk, not bomb. At the moment, it's not looking promising. Another front is opening up. Iran's ally in Yemen, the Houthis, are threatening to block the Bab al-Mandab Strait. That's the exit from the Red Sea that Saudi Arabia uses to export oil that Iran will not let through the Strait of Hormuz. That could precipitate a new war between the Houthis and the Saudis and Pakistan.
For a long period of time, including during this conflict. I think that if there is something like that, we'll just have to take care of business.
Iran managed to hit an American base in Jordan, killing 2 US soldiers and wounding many more. That could be a sign that the US is rationing its interceptor missiles, as it has used so many. The US attacks on Iran resumed after negotiations to reopen the Strait of Hormuz broke down. Iran blocked the strait after the US and Israel attacked it at the end of February. For the first few days, the Americans mostly hit ports and military bases along the coast, as well as what they said were missiles and drone launches. After nearly a week with dozens of nightly airstrikes, they went after critical infrastructure also used by civilians, including bridges and transport networks. Then the US attacked a nuclear power plant that's being built in Dakhovin that UN inspectors have said contained no nuclear material. And in the last few days, the attacks have gone deeper inland, including military bases near Tehran for the first time during this renewed offensive. Now, President Trump says the next target could be Pickaxe Mountain near Natanz, where the Israelis claim Iran has moved equipment it says could be used to make a nuclear weapon. On the shores of the blocked Strait of Hormuz, supporters of the Iranian regime staged a show of defiance. There is no sign that the new airstrikes will bring the Americans any closer to victory than 5 intense weeks of bombardment in March and April. New posters, as defiant as ever, have appeared in Tehran. In Islamabad, the Pakistani Prime Minister met an Iranian delegation. Mediation by Pakistan and Qatar looks to be the only hope of de-escalating this crisis. America has the power to keep hitting Iran on its own. That is not forcing the regime to back down. More evidence that Donald Trump's huge gamble to go to war for an easy victory has failed. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.